And you create a problem, terrorist bomb, war, run on a currency, credit crunch, rising food prices, anything that will allow you to offer the solution you want to change society. You then tell the people the version of the problem that you want them to believe, i.e. Bin Laden did this, Lee Harvey Oswald did this. And the pathetic mainstream media, instead of investigating the official version, just repeat it to the people, and the people at stage 2 are supposed to react, and most of the time they do. React with outrage, with fear, and they say, something must be done, this can't go on, what are they going to do about it? At which point, those who covertly created the problem got that reaction, offer the solutions to the problems they have themselves covertly created. And those solutions are changes in society which advance the Orwellian state and the centralization of power, so the few can have more and more power over the many by this centralization of power. So,
for me, why?
We had Oklahoma City. We had the World Trade Center in 1993.
That helped the terrorists blow up the World Trade Center the first time. They built the bomb. They got the driver's license.
The informant, the FBI informant, a fellow named Salam, a 43-year-old former Egyptian army officer, he was given the assignment to put the bomb together. And he went to his supervisor, his FBI supervisor, and said, we're going to put a dummy bomb in here, right? And the FBI supervisor said, no, we're going to put a real bomb.
The FBI actually carried out the attack on the World Trade Center in 1993. They actually hired Ahmad Salam and paid him $1 million and gave him real explosives, a detonator, and told him to build a bomb and to give it to the foolish people that he was controlling to allow them to attack the World Trade Center complex.
Unfortunately for them, there were only 6 people killed, not enough to pass the legislation. So what happened is 2 years later, April 19, 1995, down comes Oklahoma City Murrah building, 168 people killed. 1 year later, the anti-terrorism legislation that takes away many of our constitutional rights and civil liberties is passed.
If you had dropped, say, a billiard ball from the top of the World Trade Center, 110 floors up there, it would have taken 8 to 10 seconds to hit the ground, encountering no resistance whatsoever.
The Twin Towers came down in nearly free-fall speed. 200,000 tons of steel shatters and explodes outwards over 500 feet.
This means that floors shattered at an average rate of about 10 floors per second.
There is no scenario for a pancake effect of buildings falling that allows them to fall at the rate of free fall.
Now what can do that? What can move mass out of the way? Explosives. They collapsed, and Building 7. Now Building 7 wasn't even hit by a jet.
Part of the problem is that most people simply don't know much about Building 7 due to the extraordinary secrecy surrounding this collapse.
And this was a 47-story skyscraper. This building fell at 5:25.
It was not hit by a plane. This building had fires on only 2 or 3 floors.
And it was brought down by what we know was a controlled demolition.
Demolitions, they look just like that. You know, a kink in the middle, and then that building just comes straight down, almost at free fall speed.
They first blow one of the central columns so the building falls in on itself. Building 7 had a classic crimp or wedge. Its central column was blown out first, so it didn't structurally damage buildings just a few feet away from it.
Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed.
But New York, very much a city still in chaos. The phones are not working properly, the subway lines are not working properly, and we know that down there...
Jane, I think many of us, when we heard the news, perhaps on the radio earlier today, were completely flabbergasted by it and just couldn't comprehend it. I mean, it almost sounded too far-fetched. I was wondering what it's felt like for you being in Manhattan. Well, unfortunately, I think we've lost the line with Jane Stanley.
Our office was on the B1 level. As I was talking to a supervisor at 8:46, and all of a sudden we hear, boom! An explosion so hard that pushed us upwards. And it came from the basement between the B2 level and the B3 level. And when I went to verbalize, we hear, boom! The impact of the plane on the top.
Was deactivated. Apparently there's another device, and obviously whatever did the damage to the Murrah building was a tremendous, very sophisticated explosive device.
So President Clinton just called Frank Keating, Governor Frank Keating, and he says that 3 FBI anti-terrorist teams are en route to Oklahoma City. Right now, they are saying that this is the work of a sophisticated group. This is a very sophisticated device, and it has to have been done by an explosives expert, obviously with this type of explosion.
The reporter said government officials stated the bombing was the work of a sophisticated group. The explosive that went off in the building was a very sophisticated device. It would take an explosive expert to have done that amount of damage. Given a little time, government spokespeople changed all this. It wasn't a sophisticated group, but rather 2 or 3 men of nondescript skills. Nor was it a very sophisticated device. Why, it was just a mix of fertilizer and ammonia that any old farm boy could put together.
Now this is the pressure pattern that you would get from the truck bomb located at this position. And that's about the size of the explosive charge of 4,800 pounds of ammonium nitrate with enough fuel on it. And even though you had about 500,000 pounds out here per square inch, by the time that pressure wave got to the first point of contact with the building was right here, you're down to about 375 pounds per square inch.
With evidence inside, was it really necessary to destroy the Murrah building? General Parton asked that question too.
And I talked to the architect, as I indicated before, and the architect told me, and this is the one who was there supervising and advising on shoring up the building. He said the building that was standing was sound. It was his recommendation that the building be rebuilt.
President Clinton's spokesperson at the White House. Apparently at this point we know a little bit more than the White House does, because we have been able to confirm that it was a car explosion. That word coming to us from Mayor Ron Norick earlier. 1,200 pounds of explosives parked out in front of the federal building. And ATF has confirmed that as well.
There's a company in Oklahoma that had pictures that were made throughout the cleaning up of the building. They hauled over 315-ton truckloads of material away from that building, hauled it out to a landfill, smashed it down with equipment as much as they could, covered it up with dirt, put it behind a chain link fence with guards on the gate. So if that's not a figurative and a literal cover-up, I don't know what is a cover-up.
Was this destruction of evidence precipitated because the government prosecutors feared the remaining forensic evidence might clear their official suspects, McVeigh and Nichols? Or would it have proven ATF, DEA, and Secret Service carelessly stored dangerous explosives on the 8th and 9th floors? General Parton feels the photographic evidence disputes the last half of this theory.
So at this point, we must suppose that one of 3 things happened. First, Tim McVeigh, along with John Doe II, whoever he is, and acting in concert with absolutely no one else at the scene, parked the truck loaded with explosives, ignited it at the scene with the fuse or from a remote location moments later, and set off the blast. They were not aware that explosives had been stored on the 9th floor by DEA, the ATF, and the Secret Service. The truck explosion on the outside triggered the cache on the inside a few seconds later.
This would account for the multiple explosions heard by hundreds of witnesses and even captured on tape, as well as the 2 separate shakes on the seismograph, 5 seconds apart. The second and third possibilities involve more intrigue and provide even a more sinister answer to the question of why this gigantic effort at a cover-up. So when the truck bomb goes off at 9:02, the barometric super bomb described by Gunderson, Ray, and Reconnaissance is triggered by a Confederate in an unmarked helicopter, which was seen above the building by several witnesses at the time of the explosion. On the surface, this theory seems to have merit, but it simply does not and cannot fit, again, the pattern of destruction. In our third case scenario, we have the conditions presented by General Parton, and the facts seem to make his the strongest case of all. Remember, he's a bona fide demolition expert from the United States Air Force, and of the precise ilk the government would have brought forward a long time ago if his testimony had been favorable to them. Of course it's not. His scenario could have included Tim McVeigh only on the fringes at best, and certainly not the mastermind. You see, both General Parton and the BATF are very aware that if Parton is correct, and he is certain that he is, it would have to involve duplicity at the highest levels of government. Those columns could not have been drilled and wired, and those charges so strategically placed without a team on the inside. Some say that this would have taken several days and not feasible because the activity would have been witnessed by too many people. But General Parton says the columns did not have to be drilled and wired, not even wrapped, he says. He says a bucket full of C4 or C5, maybe a cubic foot in size and weighing about 60 pounds, placed next to the columns he's identified would have had the sufficient power to shear those columns, turn the concrete to powder, and leave only the rebar as evidenced. This operation could have been performed in 10 minutes, said General Parton. And we found that to be interesting. The building foreman told us that there was no security in the Murrah building after 11 o'clock at night, when the cleanup crew left. Only a night watchman who patrolled the area around the U.S. courthouse. Now, with proper timing in Watergate fashion, it would have been a simple matter for those with keys and knowledge of the alarm system to enter, place the charges, and then be gone from the area before the watchman returned on his routine rounds.
Is this something that occurred as a result of talk show hosts like myself inspiring some crazies to get out there and take out a federal building? Or is this not, in fact, something that was set up for the purpose of frightening the population of this nation into surrendering our rights for a new world order?
I'll have to say, in all honesty, in all sincerity, there's no question in my mind, and this is my opinion, that an incident occurred or was established or happened that was planned, and the purpose of that was to enrage the American public, and to make sure and force Congress to pass anti-terrorism legislation, which we do not need, but which at the same time would imperil our civil liberties and further erode our civil rights and help destroy what we believe in our Constitution.
This is the actual levee that runs along the canal on the eastern side of the city, and when the hurricane hit, the water came through the canal at such force it was apparently too much. You can see the massive breach here, and when you look around the corner, you can see what the water did to the lower 9th Ward. It completely destroyed neighborhoods.
I heard something go boom!
Joe Edwards rushed to get himself and as many neighbors as possible into his truck. They drove to this bridge where they've been living ever since.
My house broke in half. My mother's house just disintegrated. It was a brick house. All the houses down there floated down the street like somebody died.
Was it solely the water that broke the levee, or was it the force of this barge that now sits where homes once did? Joe Edwards says neither. People are so bitter, so disenfranchised in this neighborhood, they actually think the city did it, blowing up the levee to save richer neighborhoods like the French Quarter.
So you're convinced?
I know it happened.
That they broke the levee on purpose?
They blew it.
The war...